Your thing is you need your glass of wine or you need your toke of cannabis, and no judgment of what that is. But sometimes just having that little bit of something can really make a difference for like the mental headspace.
Hi babes, Lady Silverstone here, and welcome to my podcast, where we're trying to demystify cannabis, one conversation at a time. In this episode, I'm talking to Magda, a Swedish-American babe that lives in sunny California. We're talking about enjoying cannabis with your parents, its importance in wellness and care, nutrition, digestion, and so much more. I hope you'll enjoy it. Hey!
Hey!
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. I just have to tell you, you really look like Amanda Seyfried. Is that her name?
Oh,
1,000 people have told you that already, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the one I get more than anything.
Really?
Yeah, thank you. I know. Yeah, it is funny that people will say that.
And she's so beautiful, so take it as a compliment.
Well, yes, thank you. You got, it's great you knew her name, because people will be like, you look like the
Mamma Mia girl?
The dumb girl from Mean. Yeah, they don't say the dumb girl from Mean Girls. And I'm like,
Thank you.
I think that's a compliment. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah,
that's great. And I just have to say, I love that you are Swedish. It just makes me so happy to speak to a Swedish person. Just like your accent.
You're like, I feel home.
I love it. Yes. Yes, exactly. I'm like, it feels so nice.
Yeah, so tell us. So you are half American, half Swedish. Did you ever grow up in Sweden?
Yeah, exactly. No, so my mother is from Sweden, and she moved here when she was 4 years old, and with her family. And so she grew up here. But every summer we would go back to Sweden and visit her parents. So my grandparents lived there. And then in the winters, they would come and stay with us here in California.
Oh, yeah.
So Swedish was the native language spoken at home.
Ah, okay.
And I just absolutely love it. Yeah. So I've been there maybe over a dozen times. And as I told you, we plan to move there in a little over a year. So we're really excited for that.
Wow, but where in Sweden? And how come you're moving away from the sun and everything?
I know, it's crazy. Well, we will move probably somewhere outside Gothenburg. Okay. We have a lot of family there with children that are the same age as my children. And so we really love them. So we have that family and that community aspect.
Yeah.
And then it feels so much more secure. Like the landscape here in America is so unstable.
Yeah. Especially where you live, right?
Yeah. We have a little home in the mountains. And so we don't experience very much. We're not in the big city. We're 15 minutes away from the ocean. Feels really safe and secure.
But isn't it a lot of like earthquakes? Because you live in California, right?
Yeah, quite a bit. Not enough that I'd say like I'm afraid of them.
No,
or I'm super concerned. Probably more things we could be concerned with are wildfires.
Yeah. Last year, or was it 2 years ago? It was just so many. It was going on for weeks, right?
Yeah.
Oof.
It's kind of a blur, but I feel like every season it's scary. It's dry.
Oh,
yeah, there were some really bad fires up north. So.
But välkommen till Sverige then.
Oh, tack så mycket!
Oh, love your Swedish.
Yes, I need to practice my Swedish. I get very nervous and awkward. So you can be my practice buddy.
Definitely. But you're already writing very well. When we started talking, we wrote to each other in Swedish.
I might have used Google Translate a little bit.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And what does your husband think about moving to Sweden then?
He loves it. At first, I was on board with it and he was a little hesitant. And since he's been there a few times, he really loves it.
Okay, that's nice.
Not only does he love the landscape and the countryside and the people, but the sense of security and that the government provides for its people in ways that we don't have here makes it sort of unquestionable. So I'm really grateful that he is so on board to come as well.
Yeah, that's nice that you don't have to feel that you're forcing him into it, because there's a lot of relationships, obviously, where there's someone that really wants to move somewhere and the partner is super hesitant and is doing it only for for the partner and still doesn't really want to do it from himself or herself.
Absolutely. I am really grateful that he is so on board. And my daughter loves it. We really absolutely love Sweden.
Oh, that's awesome. And also the West Coast is really nice.
Yeah, we really like just the slightly slower pace of city there. And ideally we'll live a little south, close to the sea, have a little piece of land.
Oh, so nice. Oh, you're like dreaming away. You're like, ah.
Yeah. My God, I can't wait to be there.
Okay, so then, because I want to know then how because we're going to talk about what you're doing already and how that's going to then be translated into like how you're going to continue that in Sweden because of the landscape. Absolutely. And so on. Okay, so you have Balance and Bliss. Tell us a bit.
Yeah, so, well, it started off, my mother she started getting really sick and she lost a lot of weight. She had really bad fatigue. She had really bad back pain. We didn't know what was happening, what was going on. There were like a few months of just this like mystery, doctor to doctor, naturopathic doctor. Nobody could tell us what was going on, but it was obviously she was really sick. And at that time, we had some friends that were in the cannabis industry and cultivating cannabis, and they gifted us some extracts. And at this time, she used it topically for her pain, and it allowed her to sleep through the night. It allowed her to be able to get in the car and go down to the ocean. It allowed her to just function and helped take the edge off of her pain because she wasn't interested in taking some of the heavy medications. So, I mean, and this is, now these days we have all these different topicals with these like delicious creams, but back then it was like sticky, ooey, CO2 oil. Like it would like stain her shirt. Like it was just like, it worked though, which is so powerful. And we also used cannabis together, and that really helped us process just what was going on, because she ended up passing a few months afterwards. So she had pancreatic cancer. And she had a tumor that was about 6 centimeters on her pancreas, and it had spread to her liver and her lungs. So essentially like the worst diagnosis you could get. So that is what like really set me on my path towards understanding that cannabis is medicine.
How was it before? Like, what did you think about cannabis before that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with cannabis being used. Like my dad has consumed cannabis for maybe all of my life that I've known. So that was always just a smell that I associated with him. And he had cultivated it a little bit on our land, but it was very low key. It was definitely more so recreational. So that experience definitely opened my eye to the healing properties, especially topically.
Yeah.
And that's also what really triggered my inspiration to understand, why does this medicine work and how does this medicine work?
There must have been a very both emotional connection to the cannabis, because you saw how your mom, who was suffering from all these, not only the pain from the cancer itself, but also the side effects of the medication, right? Like that is hard to see.
Yeah, I mean, it helped with her hunger, and it helped just more than anything us just be present with one another, because it was really only me and her, and just be present and not get too wrapped up in the really heavy circumstances of death and that reality of her being really sick. It was a really hard thing to accept. Consuming cannabis just allowed us to be present with one another and laugh and be silly and have a good time, despite that she was like really sick and like her body was like dying. So cannabis has that really special place in my heart. And it showed me that cannabis can work topically, it can work as medicine. And then I began to research and discovered the endocannabinoid system. And it was this huge aha moment for me of, there's this system that every mammal has that is a vital adaptogen system. And how come nobody's talking about it? Yeah. So I began just essentially reading PubMed research articles and then translating them to everyday conversational language so that people could start to understand some of the research.
That is so important because it takes practice, because I don't know if you already knew how to read them before or not.
Yeah, I had studied biochemistry at UCSC. And so I was familiar with a lot of the language, but of course would, Google different terms to try and understand it. And of course there's research that was contradictory.
Yeah.
So having to really, look at who is doing the research, how many people are in the research study, or, how, what's the case study, all those kinds of things. So, but that was really, I found that really fun because I was able to take something that people are like, oh yeah, cannabis helps with pain. Well, let's look at how and why and start to understand it. So I really enjoyed that. And, I also had launched a topical line that had cannabis, had THC and CBD. It's called hälsa, but in Swedish it would be hälsa.
Ja, hälsa, okay.
Yeah, so it means health in Swedish. Hälsa topicals.
Do you still have this line?
No, I don't. So when cannabis became legal and you had to have a permit, at the time I had brought on a partner and he had a farm in Humboldt that was supposedly going to get permitted. And it did not get permitted. So essentially, we didn't have a golden ticket to operate as a cannabis business. But at the time, our partnership wasn't really working anymore. And it was just how it unfolded. And so that's when I really pivoted and focused on balance and bliss and focused on education and teaching people and hosted online webinars to help them find relief, whether it was just to help them sleep better, to help with pain management, to help with hunger, the resources to make the product for people so that they could get a huge discounted price because they wouldn't even be able to afford something from the dispensary.
I mean, it's really easy to see, products online or in a dispensary, like you say, and you have no idea how to really use it, especially now when we don't really have a standard dosage of different cannabis products. So how did you find that?
Well, first I'd look at any research showing their specific type of dosage to see if its effectiveness. But oftentimes I would recommend people start with a micro dose. So it would depend if they had experience using cannabis before. A lot of the times would be people that had never used it before. And it was like totally uncharted territory. So we would start with a dosage from 5 to 10 milligrams of THC and almost always include either a 1-to-1 of THC to CBD or a higher amount of CBD just to calm the psychoactive effects of the THC, but still allow the cannabinoids to be effective. And then I would support them. And that's where the coaching is so valuable, because instead of just going and buying a product that you are sort of figuring out on your own, you have someone that's saying, okay, how they usually would have a journal. So they would document it. And then we would have a discussion around, okay, how did you feel after you took that half an hour afterwards? So really just observing as much as possible and then slowly increasing the dosage until they found the relief that they were looking for.
Okay, that's great. And usually do they come to you and already have experience with cannabis, or were there a lot of people that never tried it before but found you because they were curious, let's say?
A lot of people had no experience and they were actually had stigma around cannabis. So educating them on how they have the system in their body that the cannabis interacts with, and how there's other plants and foods that they're probably consuming that also supports the system, like flaxseed. So the education helped normalize it, because I was there essentially holding their hand through it. And then for those that were really concerned, what I would do is I would give them a product that was higher dosage of CBD so that they could use the CBD to help alleviate psychoactive effects of the THC.
Sorry for interrupting. I hope you enjoy listening so far. Please check out my account Lady Silverstone at patreon.com so I can continue creating cannabis content for you.
So many people find relief from cannabis products because how the endocannabinoid system plays such a vital role in regulating your immune system and regulating inflammation, especially in the
Yeah.
digestive tract.
Yeah. I think that is something that I think a lot of people that are interested in health in general understands already that the digestive tract is super important. Like it's everything. Yeah. We call it the second brain, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, unfortunately, it's only it's not a lot of people that know it. You know, it's still something that for most of the people they don't understand. They're like, no, but that's just the part where all the food is just flushed away and then out. But it's so much more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people say like you are what you eat. Be conscious of what you're eating. There's essentially like your daily eating practices and things like how fast you chew. So chewing your food really, really well literally is breaking down those food particles, increasing the surface area of the food. And the longer you're chewing, you're releasing a digestive enzyme called salivary amylase in your saliva. So the more that you are chewing your food is going to help what goes on further along in the digestive tract.
Okay.
Eating in a calm and restful state, right? So when we eat and we're rushed, we're on the go, we're driving, we're texting, we're on Instagram, we're in this fight or flight state, nearly all digestive secretions are inhibited or limited. So those are some simple things that we can do to help increase the absorption of the food. And chewing, that part of actually putting it in your mouth is the only part of digestion that is voluntary. So a lot of the times I'm working with people to help incorporating those practices. Yeah. And if you're someone like me, I'm someone that usually would scarf down my food. So I've really had to practice slowing down. And I tell people it's a practice, just like a mindful practice or a yoga practice, right? You don't go to yoga once and then you're like, I'm a yogi, I'm done, right? No. It's a practice. So every day, every meal, slowing down, chewing your food really, really well. And then there's a whole host of things that we can look at as far as what's going on in the microbial status of your gut. So there's a lot of things that I look at one-on-one with people, but those are some basic things that every single person can benefit from.
You know, it's stuff that we should know, but we need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I try and make all the content that I'm sharing really usable and valuable. I mean, I chose Balance and Bliss because cannabis, which interacts with your endocannabinoid system, is responsible for how you experience balance and bliss. So that was like, oh yes. And everyone, we all, want to live in this state of balance and bliss. I'd hope so. But being a mother, I've now rebranded as the Nourished Mother. So there I do, I'm finding that balance of still including cannabis and CBD and all that information. And we'll be growing a small crop here, which is on our land, which is what I love to connect with, growing the plant and eating the raw form and juicing it and utilizing it in all its form.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely be sharing just more about how cannabinoids can help as well.
What do you see then for the future? Because if you're going to go to Sweden, for the moment, Sweden is, as you know, very, very strict, especially on their zero tolerance towards drugs.
Right.
But I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe that are, they're opening up legally little by little. There are already a lot of CBD companies, or not a lot, but a few, a handful of CBD companies in Sweden. And again, it's going to grow. And otherwise, there's still the Netherlands, Spain.
Yeah, you're definitely motivating me and helping me feel excited. Last time we were in Sweden last summer, I spoke with some people and I just sort of got the impression that you don't want to mess with it. You don't touch it, like CB, And so I figured, okay, well, yeah, as someone that's moving there, I have my Swedish citizenship, which is wonderful. But I'm like, okay, yeah, I definitely want to play on the safe side. But the fact that there are CBD companies, and I guess if as it shifts, it might as well be someone to offer resources. Once it becomes more welcomed in the communities. And my husband does work in the industry as well as a consultant in the cannabis industry.
Okay.
So who knows? We might still be able to, have some connections there in Europe, but we'll just kind of have to see how it goes as we get closer to moving.
And that's why I also think it's good that you're going to live close to Gothenburg, but yeah, maybe a bit south, but in that area, because I do think that open-minded and just seeing it in a little different way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I'm still very curious. I mean, when we were there this last time, we were in I think we were taking the tram through like Majorna, and like there were definitely some people that like smelled like cannabis, and you could tell, I'm like, okay, it's definitely around here. Like,
is there a lot of stigma when it comes to using cannabis, and especially being open about it like you are, and being a mother?
Yeah, I think that for me personally, that's something I really struggled with, having a cannabis company and being a new, like fairly young mother. It's sort of something that I think a lot of mothers, either people are very open about it and they have used it for their postpartum depression, or they've used it, for a specific, to heal a certain ailment, and they're maybe more open about it.
Yeah.
But I definitely have felt more subconscious about it, and that there is a stigma around it. However, I know that is shifting slowly but surely. But there is that stigma there, of course. I mean, I think it's almost bred into us, even being someone from California who grew up with it all around.
Yeah.
But I think it's also one of those things that people are doing at home by themselves and not telling other people that are also doing it at home by themselves, right? So it's sort of just like, if we could all just like be in communication about it, right, it'd be all fine. But there is definitely, I think, still stigma. But I know for myself and for many friends and mothers that sometimes, a microdose of cannabis can make a really big impact to help you feel more grounded, feel more connected, feel more present with your child, right? Obviously, assuming that they're an appropriate age. But just, especially those really long days when you're home with your kid all day long, and you need, right? Like, and that's what I found, is that people, either your thing is you need your glass of wine or you need your toke of cannabis, and no judgment of what that is. But sometimes just having that little bit of something can really make a difference for like the mental headspace.
Yeah.
What I do is I simply will try and provide the information and let people decide for themselves, right? So I don't recommend using cannabis when you're pregnant or when you have a newborn, but for specific situations, if someone is extremely anxious and they're considering, they're taking a pharmaceutical drug and it's that versus cannabis, right? There's so many different factors at play. But I found the people that I've worked with most are those that have really chronic conditions, whether that's even, really bad anxiety, really bad stress management. It was actually challenging in a way, because, providing medicine to people that are at the tail end of their life. And I think cannabis can be a great medicine for that transition, but that's also a very hard, like emotionally, client to work with, right? Because you get to know them, you become attached to them, and then they pass away. And it's such like a sacred and like a really special role. But I've sort of told myself, like, let me wait like 10 or 15 years and then I'll, I'd rather, I am so much more of a preventative medicine, really do my best to make the healthy choices. And so I sort of shifted to working with people that would also use cannabis in that lens.
Dear listeners, if you like what you hear, please check out my Patreon. The link is in the description here below. Only if you're able to, of course. Now, let's get back to our guest. How do you think, who've grown up with... I mean, California has always been a very liberal state, especially when it comes towards cannabis, right?
Right.
What do you think Europe should do differently? Or do you think we have to do anything differently to make it legal here? Or how do you think that whole process will be? Do you think it will be very different from how it was in the US, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ideally, the more research and understanding, if it can be driven from that sense, I think that is much more powerful. I think a lot of here in California, it was driven by making money because they realized they can tax can tax it, right? So it became really lucrative and advantageous from that lens, which unfortunately, I mean, the nonprofit that my husband works for, it's almost too expensive for them to give away free cannabis because of the amount of taxes. So ideally, I would think that legalization would be driven by allowing people to have access to medicine that could really make a difference in helping them find relief and helping them heal their ailments. And it was more science-based and health and wellness-based. I mean, of course, a huge part of the market is recreational, right? Which is fun. And, like Los Angeles, there's tons of parties and these really beautiful dispensaries and all those things, which is really great. But I have always really stood for, let's look at some of the science here and really let's get the proper dose for these different disease dynamics and, maybe have them in the medical system, but have them accessible, just like you next to your Advil or your Tylenol in the local drugstore. Right. So I think that would be ideal. And to just, help shift the stigma to this is an herb and it has medicinal properties. And yes, they can be psychoactive, but how can we utilize it as medicine and as a food?
Yeah. How do you think we can do that? I mean, how do we reach the masses of people with education? Because education is what can, in the end, make them change their mind about it. But how do we even get this person who is so against cannabis, for example? How do we even make this person read some of the findings?
Yeah, well, I think platforms like yours, I think podcasts are a really great way. Video content, I think, can be more powerful than having someone, read a research article or a research review, especially when it comes down to children and children have with seizures and they take this medicine and it's completely calming to their nervous system and helps them restabilize, right? I think it's also people sharing their own experiences from the relief that they have had from cannabis, from a whole host of ailments. But I think it comes, I think that word of mouth is really powerful because oftentimes when I've had people come to me, it's because they, their friend or their sister or their cousin has used this and they had relief and they're wondering how it can help them too. So I think that is a really powerful way that's going to make a larger impact than, blasting a post on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because people want to see how clearly and concretely how it actually helped someone either that they know or I don't know that they've seen, someone that they can hear the story from, because that's the only way they can relate, right?
Absolutely. Well, when you have that trust and that the familiarity with someone that has, especially when it's a similar ailment like anxiety or sleep, right? And especially if you've seen that person struggle with it and then they have relief because they tried something new. I know I'm someone that one of my good friends has a great experience with the product. I'm way more open to trying it than if I see an ad on Instagram or something, right? So that word of mouth, that firsthand experience, that trust, those are all really crucial. And I think that's what brands are trying to do. They're trying to build trust with the consumer. The thing here in California, especially in the CBD market, is that it is just so flooded. There's so many products. Yeah, but I think that's really what's, we all have that responsibility in a way if we are cannabis consumers or we're people that have had relief from it or have seen other people firsthand have relief, to speak up and to say something. If you're in a conversation where someone's saying, I'm really struggling with this, right? And just saying it authentically, I think that's the most important part because then it's going to be received authentically.
I remember when I was, 5 years old, and I was sick from school and my mom was working, but my dad had a scheduled knee operation, but a keyhole operation. So he was still awake during it, but like local anesthesia around his knee. Mm-hmm. So I was in the room with him. I don't know how. Wow. I don't even know if that would be okay now. But the 90s, early 90s, right. The kid was sitting in the room looking at the operation, with the camera. It was crazy. But so my dad has always had knee pain. Always. Like that is something that my dad has always had. Like for me, I know that my dad has always had knee pain.
Right.
And since, I don't remember if it was this summer or early fall, I made a lot of cannabis coconut oil. So the cannabis that I've been vaping for a while, I made oil out of it. I mixed it with the coconut oil and had some oil done. And so I gave him a tincture. I'm like, yeah, you can try it, if you want on your knee, just to see if it works. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. And if you want, you can also take a few drops under your tongue. Don't take too many. Start slow, late, like this December, he told me that, so do you have any more of that cannabis oil? Or we call it hash oil. It's not hash oil. I made it from flour. But anyway.
Right.
That's what, that generation, it's a lot of hash for them. I'm like, no. And so he was like, do you have more of that? Because since I got it, I haven't had any knee pain. Because then he's taking, he's putting it on his knee and he's taking like half or like a teaspoon every morning and every evening. And he hasn't had his knee pain. And for me, that's huge because he has just always had knee pain.
Right.
That is amazing.
Experiences like that and stories like that someone listening is say, hey, I have knee pain, I have back pain. Maybe I should try this. Right.
Exactly.
And that's what's going to make a difference.
I think so too. So now, you had your parents very liberal from the beginning. I mean, if you grew up with a dad, while for me it was the typical Swedish mindset when it comes to cannabis. So like telling my parents that, I'm like, ooh, but it went well and now it's fine, They're like supporting me and with what I do and so on. It's really nice.
Yeah, that is so great. Yeah, I think it's once people have their own experience, that's what's going to, make that shift.
It's really awesome. I'm so happy about that. Okay, so babe, I gonna go and eat because I am super hungry. Where can we find you? How do we contact you? Where do we find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at The Nourished Mother. My website is thenourishedmother.us. There you'll find coaching information, the programs that I teach, the educational blog. But I'm most active on Instagram. And I would love any questions, any feedback. It's been great to be here with you today.
Yes, same. And I will put your information obviously in the podcast description so they can directly find you and your website as well.
I'm so glad we got to connect. I knew that I loved you from the beginning, but now I'm like, yes, she's Swedish. She's amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, have a great dinner. So good to chat with you.
Oh, so nice. Have a really good day. I mean, you're starting your day right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, have a good night. Talk soon.
Yes, thank you. See you soon, babe.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hej då. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to my social channels and rate this podcast. And if you would like to support me a little bit extra, it would really mean the world to me. So check out my Patreon profile that I linked in the episode description. It's all thanks to your support that I can continue talking, writing, recording, and making more cannabis content for you and our amazing community. Have an awesome day and lots of love.